Greetings, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. Joseph Marcinko, Assistant Public Works Director, here to present information on public hearing on proposed water rate increases and introduction of an ordinance establishing new water rates, fees, and charges. This presentation is for the City Council meeting on May 2nd, 2023. The recommendation is that the City Council hold a public hearing to receive public testimony and consider all protests concerning the adoption of an ordinance establishing water system user fees and charges, and find that California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, does not apply to the ordinance that modifies the city's water rates, and approve the introduction and first reading of the ordinance establishing rates, fees, and charges for the use of and services related to the city's water services. Oxnard's water customers. Oxnard serves water to residential, commercial, industrial, institutional, and agricultural customers. We serve more than 43,000 accounts and customers with potable water service. And of that 43,000, approximately 85% are single family and multifamily residential customers. Operations. Our operations, we look at water supply. We use surface water and groundwater, and that constitutes about 40 to 50% of our entire water budget. We have operation and maintenance expenses. We have 10 groundwater wells, 5,700 fire hydrants, 6 blending stations, and a staff of 70 people. We have infrastructure investments, including the capital improvement program projects. We're doing one for AMI for automated metering infrastructure. This is installing 43,000 new water meters across the city. We also have a desalter, and we have over 500 miles of water pipelines that we're looking at replacing a portion of every year. We also have water monitoring, testing, and compliance that consists of approximately 3,700 tests per year and 300 types of analyses. Financial debt coverage and reserves. We have to make a minimum debt coverage ratio of 1.1, and we endeavor to be able to obtain 25% of our money of our operating budget in reserves. That's in case of an emergency and is listed in Resolution 15595. Oxnard's potable water sources. We have 3 water sources. The first one is Cayugas Municipal Water District. We get water, as you can see on the graph, from Northern California, comes through Metropolitan Water District, gets treated at their Jensen Water Treatment Facility, plumbed through Cayugas Municipal Water District, and served to us. It consists of about 30 to 40% of our water supply. The second portion is water from the United Water Conservation District. That is about 30 to 40% of our water supply and comes from groundwater wells in the Oxnard groundwater basin area. And the last is about 20 to 30% of our supply is from an allocation that the city has through Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency, and that consists of 20 to 30% of our water supply. So an acre foot of water, just as a reference, is about 1 foot of water on the size of a football field, just to give you a visual understanding of what an acre foot of water is. And in comparison, the total water usage in Oxnard for fiscal years 21 to 22 was 26,102 acre feet. We use a lot of water. Background. Back in with rates, we're looking at routine review of rates as a good management practice done by all water systems. It's usually done on 5-year cycles. Oxnard's most recent water rate study, was conducted in 2017. So 5 to 6 years ago, and a lot of things have gone up since then. So we enlisted Raftellus to begin work on a cost of service study, and it kicked off in August of 2022. Discussion. Challenges facing the city's water utility come from climate change, aging infrastructure, global supply chain issues, rising equipment and supply costs, and rising costs of imported water. Consumer Price Index has also risen more steeply since 2009 for water and sewer rates. And the main reason for this is that the infrastructure replacement costs are very high for water and sewer utilities. The aging infrastructure is failing, and so you have to install new infrastructure in the ground that has very high costs associated with it, and rates absorb those costs. So other costs that have gone up, just as a comparison, we've used natural gas, electricity, vehicles, imported water and groundwater as examples here, and you can see the difference in the prices from 2017 to 2022. This represents what we're experiencing, not having rate increase in 5 to 6 years, and what that does to the budget for the water operations. Operation and functional costs. Some of the primary ones are purchase water supply costs are about 40 to 50% of our budget. Important operation and maintenance expenses are another big factor. Labor, chemicals, and electricity for those, or some of the major ones in those important operation and maintenance expenses. We also have the capital improvement program, CIP, projects and costs. These tend to be large multi-million dollar projects. Again, that goes along with what I mentioned earlier in the replacement of the aging and failing infrastructure, and those carry a high cost associated with them. We also have to pay for debt service on bonds issued for system improvements. So for other prior year system improvements, because these costs are so high, we get bonds to be able to fund them, and you have to pay for the debt service on those bonds. Also, so we do a lot of water monitoring, testing, and compliance to make sure the water is safe to drink. That has a high cost associated with it, as well as making sure that we have sufficient operational reserves. That's in case that we ever have an emergency where we have to be able to have extra funds to make sure we have money available to operate the system, because water is such an important commodity. So some of the efficiency efforts that we have and do to make sure that we're keeping costs down and being efficient. We run annual water loss audits to make sure that we're accounting for water that's leaking and not being used. So this is really the essence of water that we produce versus water that goes through customers' meters, and make sure that we're not losing a lot of that through the old aging infrastructure. So the next area is budgets versus expenses. We do quarterly reviews, sometimes even more than that, making sure that we're in touch with what our budget is versus what our expenses are, and keeping those as close as possible. We also use the lowest qualified bids for getting materials and contracted services. We work with Edison to utilize the lowest plans to make sure that we secure the lowest electricity rates, because we use a lot of electricity for pumping water. And we apply for grants to reduce those high costs associated with the capital projects. Monitoring the water allocations to make sure that we're not going over what our allocations are and incurring high penalties, as well as replacing the old inaccurate water meters to make sure that we're closely and accurately monitoring the amount of water that we're producing and we're providing to our customers. Some other operational efficiencies that we look at, and this is a big one here, is that the price of imported water versus groundwater is quite significant. So the more that we can utilize groundwater, the lower our operational costs would be. So this slide shows an example of that, about almost $1,000 difference in price per acre foot. And if, this uses an example saying that if we could utilize all of that water that we purchase and take it out of groundwater, that would be a significant difference of about $15 million. So we have 6 rate study goals that we look at. One is to cover operations and maintenance costs. Second one would be to cover infrastructure investments. A third one is that they're legally compliant, everything that we do here in the rate study and cost of service study. We want to promote financial viability with that. We take into account the community values as well as the ultimate rates and the effects to make sure that they're fair and equitable. Some inputs and considerations into that. So we looked at the rate study period and we're recommending a 5-year period. We're looking at pass-through charges and recommending that we include a pass-through charge so that we don't have to do an overestimation of what that is without getting it. We just pass through what is actually handed on to us. Drought rates. So we're looking at recommending drought rates. And that is so if revenues go down during high drought required times, that we're able to adjust the revenue to be able to pay for our operational costs. Capital improvement program. These are the large capital projects that we need to be able to change out that old aging infrastructure, and the amount we have to maintain a reserve balance. We target to aim for 25% in reserves. Again, that's for an emergency if we ever need to pull money that we have available so that we don't have to shut down the water operations. And we have to meet a minimum by bond covenants of 1.1 debt coverage ratio. So that's something we always have to maintain or we're going to technical default on our bonds, as well as water delivery costs. Have to make sure that we take that into consideration. So water rate history, this slide shows fiscal years 12 to 13 all the way through 21 and 22, and any water approved water rate adjustments as well as water pass-through adjustments. The key here is to show that the last water increase that we had was fiscal year 17-18, and costs have gone up since then. So that's the important things to note on this graph. The water fund balance without new rates. So one of the first things that we were looking at is what happens if we don't get a rate increase, and this graph is an example of that and shows the different functions. So without a rate increase, that we end up going into a deficit. That's really what this shows. So this is a table of what the proposed rates are. So for the fixed charges, for what these current rates are, let's say for a 5/8 inch or 3/4 inch is $20.60. And then upon approval of a rate increase, that would change to $22.78 for that 5/8 or 3/4 inch line. And you can see the rest of what the proposed rate increases are from this table. So this next table shows the proposed rate change overview for the volumetric rate. So this is based upon the different tiers that we have, water usage, and again, what the current rate is and what the proposed rates would be over the 5-year proposed rate study and subsequent increase. And the last table here is what a sample bill would look like with the proposed rate changes. So this really just covers the next fiscal year. But just to show you that, like for a single family residential, the current bill would be, for average usage, would be $50.39. The proposed bill would be $62.65 with about a 24.3% change. So drought rates. Drought rates, if imposed during droughts, make customers conserve water. So water conservation results in reduced consumption. There is a corresponding reduction in expenditures because you're not buying as much water and you're not selling as much water. The reduced consumption impacts revenue. However, the operational costs remain relatively constant. You still have to make sure that you have water in the pipes and that you have the ability to be able to meet demand. Drought rates ensure that the revenue covers the remaining costs, and the city council can implement drought rates. So we had some value differences, and the drought rate values in the proposed ordinance or cost of service study are lower than the values listed in the Prop 218 notice. The approval of lower amounts than what is in the notice is allowed. And so staff is recommending that we use the lower values that are noted in the ordinance and the cost of service study. Below that are the actual values for the different drought stages. So if we're going in a drought stage up 10%, that would result in a 3.9 increase on volumetric rates during that drought implementation, stage 1. So financial assistance programs. We have a couple different financial assistance programs here for customers. The first one is the Low Income Household Water Assistance Program. And we also have Project Assist in here. And these are available to our customers through giving a call to utility billing, and they can walk them through what's involved into signing up for these programs. So Prop 218 has pretty strict requirements on what you can do and you can't do. And so you cannot collect revenue beyond what's necessary to provide the service. Revenues are derived by the charge shall not be used for any other purpose. The fee may not exceed the proportional cost of service for that parcel. No charge may be imposed for a service unless that service is actually used or immediately available to the owner of the property. A written notice of the proposed charge shall be mailed to the record owner of each parcel at least 45 days prior to the public hearing when the agency considers all written protests against the charge. More Proposition 218 information. Proceedings for the new water rates followed the Proposition 218 requirements as set in Resolution 14877. Proposition 218 notices were mailed to parcel owners and water service account holders. There are 43,859 served parcels in the city of Oxnard. If the number of protests received up to the closure of the May 2nd, 2023 public hearing are less than 21,930, the City Council may consider a rate increase. The number of protests received up to the closure of the May 2nd, 2023 public hearing are 21,930 or more. The proceedings will cease and there will not be a rate increase. Financial impact. The financial impact is that the rate increase would improve the water system's financial performance. It would reduce the possibility of future bond rating downgrades, would provide revenue that will meet the debt coverage ratio, sustain critical operations and maintenance, and fund capital expenditures. Absent an increase in rates, will result in significant decreases to the water operations, deferring of maintenance items, and ceasing critical capital projects that will need to be reconsidered. I'm available for questions, and this concludes my presentation. I'll be available to answer these questions at the corresponding City Council meeting on May the 2nd. Thank you.